Okay, so we're gonna call the meeting, the special budget committee meeting to order at 3:03 p.m. I believe we have all members in attendance, so Pam's not coming. She's out for a while. So I'm gonna cover for finance. So we're gonna start with the call to order. And the approval of the agenda. We only have one item on the agenda today, the community services grants criteria and review. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Yeah, move to approve.
Yeah, motion to
I'll
approve.
second.
And a second, thank you. We'll do a roll call vote because Steve Olson, I know, is virtual. So technically, if we have a virtual attendee, we are supposed to do a roll call vote. So committee member Olson.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Haney.
Here.
Mayor, and this is the approval of the agenda. Sorry.
Yes. And I'm here.
Yeah, and we did skip that. So I'll also note who's present. Mayor Sticks, and then committee member Rains.
Here.
Okay, and do you approve the vote to approve the agenda as well? Thank you. So we have all members in attendance and we've approved the agenda. We are going to take public comment. And so just whoever's here and wants to speak will go ahead and ask everybody to take a turn. We don't have the speaker cards because we don't normally have attendees at these meetings.
Actually, we put some out.
Oh, did we put some out? Okay.
I
would say-
and let's clarify, speaker cards are for the public, not the applicants. The applicants will be given the opportunity to speak for when called upon.
Yes. So is there any member of the public who's not speaking for related to one of the applications who wants to speak? I figured, okay. Bob Daddy.
This thing has come up and has been a disaster. It's really a shame what we've done year after year after year. We have people come in and we ask for money, we give money, they beg for money. Good governance is governance that has communication. It has probability. It has expectations. Good governance is something where people have a reasonable expectation to know what you're doing and how you're doing it. And that's not even been close. We have people asking for all kinds of things. We don't have a proper format. We don't get their 990s if you don't have proper rules that say, number one, you're going to be registered with the Secretary of State. You're going to be a 501c 1 through 22 or 26, whatever they're up to now. They're going to go ahead and they're going to turn those things in so you can look and see what they're doing, where they're spending their money, how many people they've got on payroll, and what their financial position is. And none of those things are done. We don't have the proper applications. I don't like giving money to people that have got multi-million-dollar enterprises going, and they've got their hand out like this is a freebie. It's a freebie because we've treated it that way and let everybody believe you show up, you ask the city, and they'll give you money. We have things, this is taxpayer money. We have things that we need that are primary. If you're going to give away money, give it away to make this city fireproof. That's the biggest problem we have. And if you're not going to do that, then give it away and have the individual groups do things for you. So if we don't have the resources to do the e-waste, put a grant out and put something there where the community gets value, just not a favor. And we've given it out as favors. We give away money to people that re-give our money away in their name, and they're on the application. And again, this is taxpayer money. So if we got 150 grand, we say we want to cut down traffic gridlock. We want to cut down climate change. We want to do all these things, yet we don't have any bike racks. We're 200 slots short. We have codes that require bike racks for every business, and we don't have them. If we're not going to require them, then let's put them in. People are not going to, I've got dozens of pictures. People aren't going to leave their bikes stacked around. So let's do this thing in an orderly process. I think the community comes first. We have this psychosis where kids now think that the world's coming to an end with climate change. We've taken hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mr. Haney, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars out of our kids' recreation budget since Jerry Kirshner got here. We never fully stocked it back up. And if we're going to give away money to the most needy, then put that in there and give that to the kids. And again, this thing has been a joke, but I'm going to say this. When you get into specifics, and I'm not going to pander for specifics, when you give people money over a certain period of time and you just pull the rug out the next year, that's not good governance. There's got to be expectation and probability. So when you have been giving money to people, I don't believe it's okay just to chop them right off. I think what you do is you give them the 1 minute warning, like, hey, we're gonna do something. It's probably not going to be what you want, but then this is probably going to go away. And again, the biggest charity is we don't do the e-waste. We don't have the bike racks. We're not fire safe. We could do better. Hardening shelters for old people. We could do better in a lot of areas with water savings. We could do better in a lot of areas. I really think there has to be value.
Can you wrap up, Bob? Sorry to interrupt. We were well over 3. I just want to be fair to everybody. Thank you. Yeah, we don't have it up, so I have it here. So I will, when we have speakers, I'll ask everybody to just kindly wrap it up when we get to 3 minutes.
Could you please talk about bike racks a little bit, James?
Yes. Let's do it when we're about to get into the item. And so
Never mind. Never
let
mind.
me,
Later.
I'll address
To
that
be
there.
continued.
Yeah. So any other speakers that are not here to speak to a specific application or project? Okay. And so I think with that, we'll move on to the discussion and action item. It is the item on the agenda today is to review the criteria and projects, the community service grant projects. I'll start with just a brief staff report, and it speaks to some of the issues that Mr. Daddy just spoke to as well. The city this year in the adopted budget included $151,000 in community funding. And so in the past, the city had typically received 2 to 3, maybe 4 applications for community funding. And so it was the whole process was relatively informal because there were only a few applications, and the amount requested usually ended up somewhere around what was budgeted. This year, for anybody, I'm sure everybody's heard this at this point, but for anybody who maybe hasn't, we received a record number of applications. I think it was 13 total, although we had a couple that we had received and then kind of got withdrawn before the process started. So I think we ended up with 13 total that were considered. And then the amount that was requested ended up being over $340,000. So essentially, I think one of the things that I think we're here for today that I am recommending that the committee look at is when we have all of a sudden a lot more requests and a lot more dollars being requested than we have available, we have to figure out how we're going to review those and what the criteria is to review those. Because in the past, as I said, is relatively informal. And so I believe the staff report was distributed to all the committee members and also to the applicants. We didn't want anybody to be caught off guard or surprised. And so if you've seen that, what we did was we looked at other cities around us and we pulled criteria from other cities. And if we didn't think something was necessarily applicable for Ojai, we pulled that out. If we thought it made sense for Ojai, we are recommending leaving it in. And we developed, which is on page 2 of the staff report, a list of criteria that can be considered for these projects to determine which projects should be funded. I'll just note one of the comments from Bob Daddy about the application process. I will say that we've seen the cities around us, the applications getting longer and longer and longer, as I think everybody's struggling with getting more requests and trying to figure out how to really manage them. Our application for comparison this year was, I believe it was 3 pages. By comparison, Ventura's application this year is 11 pages. And we have, I have it before me. It's pretty in depth. It asks for a lot of information. And so it's not unusual, I guess, is what I'm saying, or it's not atypical that cities right now, I think, are getting a lot more requests than they used to and are trying to figure out better ways to manage them and to evaluate them. And so both Ventura and Thousand Oaks also have a couple pages of criteria for the projects that they will and won't fund. And so in our staff report, we included a list. I will go ahead and I think it's important enough that I'll kind of read the list of criteria so people can have a feel for what staff is recommending that we look at. I think there will be kind of 2 questions following this discussion. One will be if that criteria is appropriate or if there's anything that we should add or remove as not relevant in Ojai. And then second would be then we have staff's analysis of applying that criteria to these grants, and we'd be able to discuss the grants themselves. Before I read the criteria, I will just say quickly, like I'll give an example of something that we took out for Ojai, and that is that most of the other grants in Ventura and Thousand Oaks and other cities that we saw specifically say they will not allow any grants that are for any activities outside of city limits. That was an example where when we look at that from Ojai perspective and the fact that the Valley and Ojai are pretty closely connected, we didn't recommend including that criteria. And instead, what we said is that you have to be able to show how the grant serves Ojai residents. But I think there are likely going to be organizations or applications where it might be a group that is just outside of city limits, or they might have functions inside and outside of city limits. But I think the key thing was showing how it impacts and serves Ojai. And so that was an example where we didn't just lift the criteria from other cities. We tried to take the criteria from other cities and see which ones made sense and which ones didn't. And so that left us with the following criteria. The first few were on the application. The rest were not, because these have been developed since, and that's something we can talk about too. But criteria A, applicants must operate as a 501c3 charitable nonprofit organization or a 501c6 chamber of commerce. That was a criteria previously established by the city as one of the 3 criteria that was previously established. B, applicant must use funds to directly provide a social service, educational, cultural, or beautification program to serve Ojai residents or businesses. C, applicants must submit a complete city-provided grant application. D, and so let me state quickly. So those 3 were the 3 existing criteria. And again, with those 3, we then got 15 applications that well exceeded the available budget. So then looking at it, we recommended the following criteria to be added. D, for applicants who have previously received funds, applications should include the organization's past record of use of those funds and whether previous year's funds were used for the stated purpose. Applicants shall provide a final report on prior year funding before requesting future year funding. And that was one consistent with other cities as well. E, a grantee must submit a performance report within 60 days of expending grant funds or the end date of the program, whichever is later. Failure to report may result in the city request to refund a grant amount in full or in part. and in eligibility for any future city grants. That's actually criteria that we have in our arts grants currently, where when somebody performs the project, they are supposed to provide a report of that project within 60 days. Criteria F, organizations must enter into a written grant funding agreement with the city, and grant funds must be used solely for purposes described in that application. If the activity to be funded is altered after the agreement is signed, the applicant must notify the city and may be subject to city request to refund grant amount. This is also something that's occurred with the arts grants, where a project was awarded and then the applicant decided to do a different project. And so we've fine-tuned that where now they have to submit a request to change the project. G, organizations may not be awarded funding in excess of their grant request. H, written authorization from property owners stating approval must be provided with the application when the project, event, or service is proposed at a location not owned by the applicant. That's another one. We had an arts grant a couple years ago that was proposed for a site, and then it turned out the property owner did not want the project at their site. So we're just requiring that as part of these grants, we get that written authorization from property owners. I, representatives of applicants must attend the meeting to review the grants and present information to the public. And that's just for the public transparency that where our recommendation is if somebody's requesting funds, they should expect to attend the meeting and answer questions related to those applications. J, applicants may not redistribute the city's funds to other parties or programs. That was actually a comment from our public comment about it's bad practice typically to give funds to somebody who's then going to give them away to somebody else. And it's from the city's perspective, we should just give it to the person that we ultimately want to use it. Otherwise, we don't have any control over the city's funds. K, community service grant funding should be used to provide services to the community. It's not intended to purchase items. We had never received requests before to just buy items. So that wasn't a criteria we had considered, but we received a couple of those requests this year, and the name of the types of grants that we're talking about are community service grants. So we thought that was pretty clear, but we want to add it as criteria to make it very clear. So criteria L, applications for items that fall under other city grant programs will be referred to those programs. For example, the city of Ojai has a funded arts grant program, and arts focused grants should, for example, be referred to that program because it's more of an arts grant, not a community service grant. M, applications should include other forms of support received from the city of Ojai. And this is actually one that we saw in other cities as well. Actually, in some cities, I think Ventura says if the city provides what they call inline support, which is in their budget, if their budget has a line item providing support for an organization, they actually disqualify that organization from applying for any service grants. We didn't take it that far, but we're saying that the application should clearly state that, mostly because then the public and the council knows, okay, we fund this group by this much, and it's not this much, and then another amount that wasn't reported in that application. So N, applications from other public agencies shall include the match from that agency. For example, public agency, or so we gave an example because it was maybe a little unclear. For example, if public agency A has a program and applies to Ojai for funding, the application should also show the amount public agency A is providing to the program. And so think of that in the context of if, let's say, another city, Ventura, had a program, a rec program, and they asked Ojai for funding. I think the first thing we'd ask is how much has Ventura provided if you're asking us to match funds. And so for Ojai, where we have a lot of organizations and agencies in the Valley, it would be more likely that it would be another Ojai Valley organization, but that should be included in the applications. O, applicants are not guaranteed funding in future years, and funding can end at any time. Applicants shall not assume or rely on future funding for future programming. And so those are the criteria we recommended. Like I said, we had, as staff, we were going to recommend that the committee kind of first start with, is that criteria appropriate? And then B, determined how the committee wants to move forward applying that criteria. So, yes.
I just want to say thank you, James, for
Thank you.
putting this together, and thank you, staff, because this is excellent. And thank you for doing the research to see what other cities are doing. And it will make this so much easier and a much clearer system. And clearly we are receiving so many more requests. So I really appreciate the work. And also then looking at the organizations and figuring out who meets these.
Mhm.
So I think we should move forward with this list. And of course, it's a living document, so we can always edit and change. It's a great start. So thank you.
I just want to make sure all the applicants that submitted all got a copy of this.
So I think one issue kind of looking around is I think that the people who applied from a group might not be the people that are here from a group.
Oh, so you sent it to the group.
We've sent it to every group that applied.
Okay.
We have one floating around somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. So for example, yeah, I see Bob, and so Jamie Fleming, I believe, got the email on Friday.
I hope you know what you're doing with your specificity.
Mhm.
You put a 501c3, which is a charity, you put a 501c. Only the Chamber of Commerce. Every service from the valley, because they're all 501c4s. Is that the intent to have or joint functions with community service organizations? Because they were excluded from the plan.
So that criteria in particular has been adopted criteria for the last 2 or 3 years. So it's not, so yeah, so we did not change that criteria. We didn't revise it. And that was one of those the first 3 that were have been in place and have been adopted. So okay. So
Well then, James, how do you want to proceed here? Do we want to just start at the top and have the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council do a presentation? And then are we going to decide, can we listen to all the presentations one more time? And then come back as a body and then review them, each of them,
yeah.
and vote on them at that point?
Yeah, and we could do that. The last thing I wanted to do before turning it over to the committee was, we do have the language of what city council asked for. And so there is some kind of, area for the committee to decide how they want to do this. But, what the city council motion was, according to the minutes, was that the council moved to designate $151,000 to be reserved for funding for community groups, with the Fiscal Policy Budget Committee to evaluate all community group funding requests and make recommendations to the council. And I will note one last piece to clarify is that the Ojai Valley Museum, the council separated out the Ojai Valley Museum as their own line item in the budget. So that with request is no longer considered as part of this. So, and
And-
so, okay.
And then to confirm, we are going to agree or discuss the criteria.
Mhm.
Yes. and-
Well, so it's up to the committee. If there's no concerns on the criteria, we can move forward with those criteria. Or if the committee wants to discuss it, we could discuss it. As staff, we're recommending that criteria. So if we're all ready to move forward, then that would work. If we want to hear from the speakers and then revisit it, maybe if the speakers have comments about, specific criteria. So I think my recommendation at this point is to take the comments.
Well, James, our committee, we've come a long ways with these criteria. Back when the old CDBG grants, it was like a 1-page, and I think all the applicants had to come and just make a presentation, and the council at that time had to make the decision that night. And as it said in somewhere in here, it's like you were playing God, to have to decide what groups are going to get funded and what groups aren't. But with this criteria, I very much approve of what you've done with this.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Okay.
James, I would have no concern. I think this criteria is good for this.
Okay.
We had $341,000, which we know we were not gonna authorize.
Right.
So, creating this to help us make that decision, it benefits the applicants and it benefits the community.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. And I will say, we had given this number out at the council meeting, and I think people were surprised. Because we said that Ojai has about a $13 million budget. And we provided $151,000 for these grants. And the city of Ventura has I think they're up to $168 million budget, something like 12 times our size. And they provided $140,000 for these grants. So we are actually providing a higher amount, not just proportionally, but just period, than the city of Ventura. But again, and then, then we get the requests and it's 340,000. It's not realistic for a city our size. So,
Well, we're just talking, right? My only comment to that is the fact that we rely on these groups to do so much more for a small community than a larger city who has staff members doing the bulk of their work.
yeah,
That's to me is the difference, is we're utilizing community resources for the betterment of our community as a whole. They have staffing and they have budgets, that are actually doing that service. So they don't need to have the community participation that we have.
yeah. Jeff, do you have any comments on the criteria before we go to public comment?
I think it's a great start.
Thank you.
And to build on Randy's, there's probably a lot of these items that are on this paper that in Ventura's budget are line items.
That's true.
That would make it also.
Yeah.
But what you said, Randy, I completely agree. The community support of Ojai is critical to the health of the town.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so I think with that, we'll go to public or to the comment from the applicants. So we will ask if everybody could keep it to 3 minutes. And then I think if the committee has questions, we won't hesitate to ask them. But if you can start with 3 minutes, we don't have the timer up because it requires that we have an IT person also sit through the meeting, which I'm not going to do to them. So, so I'll pull it up on my phone. So, so did we have speaker cards or do we just want to go in order? Start.
Go in order.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Good idea. So we'll put them in the list, which I think was the list we had received them, is the order that we have here. So Fire Safe Council first, and then next would be the Ojai Retreat Cultural Center if they are in attendance.
Thank you. As everybody knows, I'm Christopher Danch. I'm the Executive Director of the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council. Before I get into the merits of our application, I'd like to respond to one of the criteria because we have an unusual situation with the Fire Safe Council. The money received last year, actually in December of last year, was money that's specifically designated as a cash match to a federal state fire assistance grant. And it can only be spent in relationship to that grant. And though we signed a sub-agreement and made our payment request back in December, federal government has not decided to make any prompt payments to us. So that money currently sits in a restricted account and is now just being billed against as the project begins to move forward after a very late payment and a very small one. In fact, we're having to draw on other indirect funds as well to get the CWPP project going. So we are in a huge situation that's tied to a federal grant. The federal government was very delayed in its payment to us, its very first payment to us. Still owe us 75% of the grant. And we also were plagued in the last 2 months, having received a small down on the grant. We were plagued by contractor unavailability as our primary contractor was involved in finishing up another project. So just like any other kinds of project involving contractors, that one was not available. And we now have beginning to move on the project. James, you will receive a report of the funds for this quarter as we now have begun to bill against that restricted account. Okay. So that's where we sit. It's a little bit different where it didn't go into our general account. We just didn't spend it. It's tied to a federal grant and therefore can only be spent on that. And we're unable to launch the grant due to contractor unavailability and delay in payment from the federal government. You will note that the grant we're talking about today, which is actually to the Wildfire Collaborative of Ventura County, of which we're a member. All these projects signed the agreement on the same time back in December. Even that's a state, that's a CAL FIRE grant. And we're all now just getting started because we just received the first advance. So it's all been delayed. So us, Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council and Resource Conservation District and Bill Canyon are all just now getting started, even though we signed these agreements back in December. So just everybody takes their time in getting everything together to us, which is beyond our control. So I think I think it's a valid criteria, but I think we have exceptional circumstances here as this is tied to a specific federal grant. Back to the merits of the application. And we weren't really planning when this grant was written. This is the CAL FIRE grant to the Ventura County Collaborative of $2.7 million. There's 6 projects. We manage 2. Ventura Regional Fire Safe manages 2, and RCD manages 2. This home hardening one is managed by Ventura Regional. When this grant was written well over a year and a half ago, we were not planning on participating directly in that program, even though we would probably end up assisting in it. But circumstances have evolved since the grant was written, and now we're in a position where we are hosting one of the 3 liaisons that's just been hired by Ventura Regional for this home hardening project across the county. It's a sizable project coming in at almost $1 million. So we are now, which we hadn't planned on doing, hosting the liaison, but also realize this gives us an opportunity to significantly leverage these funds for the city of Ojai. As we have a downtown office now, and the liaison is starting now this week, that was just here this morning. We did not have within our budget staff time to assist that liaison directly, but we would like to do that. That's what this application is for staff time to allow us to focus within the city limits more so than the liaison could do by herself. She's going to be spread pretty thin across her area in the county, which includes other areas other than Ojai. But with our help, and we have some staff time available to do this, we can direct to our efforts to structures within the city of Ojai. I will add, how much time do I got, James?
You're about done.
Okay. We had the home hardening as a critical situation. If this town is going to burn down, it's going to come from an ember cast. And the only thing in a catastrophic wind-driven fire that has an ember cast that falls on this city, which we are spared in the Thomas fire, if that happens, the one line of defense is hardened structures. It also is one of the most difficult, complex, and intractable problems we have, particularly when you have 89% of the building stock pre-7A. So we have a situation here that needs our attention. This is a program designed by the collaborative to be one of the first steps of a comprehensive addressing of this issue. And here's a chance, because of changes of ourselves and our ability and our capacity to leverage this money for the benefit of the city. And that's what we're asking for. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so next we have the or let me ask the committee, do we want to ask questions kind of after they speak?
I think it'd be better to ask questions now because
Mhm.
by the
We're not,
time that this is over.
our brains will be mush. Yeah.
Yeah. So what did I want to ask Chris? So Chris, if you can come back up. I just,
Sorry, so we'll ask-
James, I have 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah.
I should have asked before I sat down, right?
Um,
Wasn't sure the format.
so I just want to, let's clarify your funding from last year.
Mhm.
You're saying that it's sitting in a, let's call it a safety, what did Al Gore call it?
Block
A black box?
Box.
Let's just say yours is,
Let's
Tucked
just say
away
it's
and you
sitting in a
haven't-
restricted
and
account.
you've just a restricted account, you're just tapping into it.
We're now just tapping into it.
Okay, so, so my question would be, if we grant this year's funding, how are we going to account for last year's funding? And would you be, able to to match the criteria for this year's money for last year's money? So in other words, if we look on here in criteria's, E is submit a performance report within 60 days of expending grant funds. So in other words, you're going to have to provide council with a list of expenditures of who, what, why, and how, and when.
Yes.
And you're comfortable doing that for past monies as well as if you receive any of these monies.
Yes, we
Okay,
are. And I will also be, I'm happy, once the CWPP project which is now underway, which is what the 50,000 is tied to, okay, then we'll be in front of the council on a regular basis and many other groups within the public workshop starting up. So I'm happy to come to the council on a monthly basis and report on what's happening, including the financial, now that we're beginning to tap into those
Okay,
funds.
my suggestion is be careful what you're saying you're willing to do, because we may hold you to that. But let's go to my second question, because there's a lot here and I don't want to
Okay,
get too deep into the woods on this. So I just want to be clear, this $30,000 is to pay for additional staff, to rent a building, office space, services, and staff. And there's no explanation of what this liaison, who it is, what it is.
well, I did provide quite a bit of documentation, post-application. I was actually out of town when the application was submitted. I had to do it over the phone. But I submitted a great deal of detail about this project and what the liaison is going to be doing. It's probably about 40, 50 pages of material. I don't see it on the administrative report.
Yeah, it's not in our report. So,
It was given to the city council in two
Back-
sections. One
yeah,
was the
back-
initial deposit of the
Yeah.
letter of determination, 990, things like that.
okay, so if I ask the city manager, he can
Yes.
pull it up and give us a better understanding of what the liaison is. And, it looks like you're paying them.
No, we are not paying the liaison.
You're just providing the office
We're
space.
providing the office space to the liaison.
What says office space and services? What services are you providing
Services we're providing.
for her or him?
We're providing scheduling services and volunteer coordination services. We provide, we have an open house that's going to be coming on September 2nd. We just worked on that today. That's going to launch the project in our area here. So we're hosting that event for the liaison and to announce this project. So we'll provide those kinds of services. But what we're going to be doing is that we're going to help them bring in people to be trained, help them organize the neighborhoods that we are going after for home assessments. And we're also working on the data strategy with the contractor, who happens to be our contractor as well. And so a variety of services, but we want to be able to spend time actually going and helping them go door to door to organize their priority assessments. They only have a limited number that can be done. They're looking for 400 around the in priority areas. So we have targeted downtown area between Montgomery and Shady to focus the efforts here in the city limits. So we'll be doing hosting workshops that go to those neighborhood blocks, finding those leaders. All that takes time to do. And so the liaison is tasked with doing some of that, but I believe she's going to be spread too thin to do it effectively as much as
Okay, thank
that's
you,
the answer
thank you.
there. So we're providing direct services to make this program happen in the city limits.
okay, thank you.
Thank you for your service, Chris. Just to clarify, to follow up on what Randy said, so the 50,000 that we gave you, what month was that? I'm not,
December.
December, okay,
December.
which you're just accessing, right?
Yes, just
Um,
starting to bill against it.
How long will that take for you to use? When do you think that would be? And then
Well,
could you at that time come back to council and say how you spent it? Or,
Well, yeah, I think under the grant agreement, we're going to have to request an extension of the time to do this. That project was originally scoped out at 16 to 18 months. We may take less than that. The thing that's going to drive the exact completion date of the CWPP is that we, under another grant, the CAL FIRE grant, are doing a fine scale risk mapping, and we're also doing a wildfire vulnerability and evacuation assessment. Those findings go in to the CWPP, so they have to be completed first. Now, there's an ongoing process that will meet that deadline with the CWPP of the workshops and everything we have to do, the technical advisory groups, the core working group, all that moves forward. But ultimately, the final draft of the CWPP is going to incorporate that data. And so that has to be done. What we're going to probably go back to on the SFA grant is confirm that our deliverable is the final draft of the CWPP, but then later on the approval by the city council, CAL FIRE, Ventura County Fire, and the county of Ventura will follow after that date, because that could take a couple of months. But we are trying, fine scale risk mapping and the vulnerability assessment was originally scoped out for a 4-year grant period. They crammed us down to 2 years, and now they've only given us about a year and a half because they haven't paid us. So we're all in a compressed time frame here to get this all done and coordinate all of that. But because we want to combine that data, the CWP is going to be done after that. We're now trying to push our scope of work to be done within 12 months on the 2 other CAL FIRE projects. So we have time to incorporate into the final draft of the CWPP. So that's where we are. You know, it's like, oh, it's like government work, right? So it is something where we have factors that we have to deal with. Some of them are beyond our control, but we're hoping to have the CWP completed by the end of the grant term, which is on or before October 31st, 2023. That's the date we're shooting for. Hopefully we'll not have to ask for an extension. That will be met if we can get the other projects that are slated for 18 months to be done in 12. That's the pressure we're under to meet all these deadlines.
I think I asked this before, at the council presentation. You have reporting guidelines for all of these grants, am I
Yes.
correct? So when you're submitting those, we could receive copies of those
Yes,
too?
it's public record.
Thank you.
Okay. I will submit them. We haven't submitted our quarterly so far. They just report no activity.
Fine.
We are now starting to report expenditures against the funds received on all 3 of those grants. And they're all moving in coordination with one another. So regular reporting is now available as we dig into those funds.
And like you said, they're all public records.
They're all public record. We're 501c3, walk in the door anytime we want.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
But yes, but we have been delayed and that has caused us the issues that we face today. But it's not just the 50,000, it's not just the criteria. We're under a time crunch to get this done now because of the delay by the government in getting everybody going. And everybody's facing the same issue. The Ventura Regional is facing the same issue. We all are now. So hopefully we can pull it all together. I think we will. And now that I think we're going to have a particularly robust
Thank you.
PP. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks,
Any other
Chris.
Let
questions,
me
James?
see if Jeff, do you have any questions? Okay. Okay. And Steve, and sorry, you're on Zoom, so if I forget you, remind me. But do you have any questions, Steve?
Oh, thanks, Chris.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next on our list was, I believe, the retreat, the Ojai retreat, right? Yeah. So is there anybody from the Ojai retreat? And if not, we'll be moving on to Help of Ojai. So anybody from either of those? Okay, and if not, but we have Ohio Ed, followed by Natural Systems. Okay. And then we have the Ojai Valley Green Coalition. Okay, Kathy.
Thank you for having me. I'll just make a quick comment about the additional criteria that was developed. Did I understand that you said you sent that out to everyone who applied?
Yes, so Christy Rivera, so it's coming from a different person because
Oh,
we
okay.
had some staff changes. So Christy Rivera yesterday, or Friday, I believe, sent an email that I was blind copied on that
Went to everyone?
went to everybody, or
Okay.
was supposed to go to everybody. So
You know, I did send the application in I did the submittal and I didn't get it, but I'll certainly look and see if it went in my junk mail.
okay.
Who would I contact if I didn't get it so I can get
It's
a
my,
copy?
well, Christy Rivera is going to be the contact. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just
Um,
write that down.
You can tell me if you didn't, and I guess following the meeting, I'll check with her
Okay.
and ask for the full list.
I'm usually pretty good and I check my junk mail numerous times a day, but
Okay.
And Kathy, just, so there's no criteria conflict identified with the Green Coalition.
yeah, I didn't see
Okay.
anything. And of course, if there was, if there's something we didn't turn in already in, the first round and you needed more as far as that criteria goes, we, of course, will be happy to submit it.
Okay.
You can just let us know when.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So basically, our project is, we're proposing a 4-year project, but this is phase 1, which would be year 1. And so the request for funding is only for this year, for the 2022-2023 budget cycle. I wanted to be clear about that. And what we're proposing is a sustainable hub for the city of Ojai, to become a sustainable hub. So we'd be actually working with the city and the public to make that happen. So we envisioned the hub being one of information, so information, data collecting, creating systems, and ultimately in like year 4, it would be of place, the ultimate product, being a master plan for the City Hall campus. But that is not part of our first year. Our first year is going to be gathering all the information to make that happen. So we'd start with community and stakeholder engagement, the process of working collaboratively and listening and sharing for preliminary programming. I'm just kind of going through because I know I don't have much time here. But so we'd be doing surveys and workshops with not only the city council staff, but also nonprofits, business members, and members of the public to find out, you know, what's needed, what's wanted, and how we can put this together. And what kind of came to mind, you know, Mr. Daddy was up earlier talking about, wow, we don't have the bike racks, which I happen to be for, but and even the, you know, the gathering the electronics that used to happen once a year. So this project that we're proposing with a sustainability hub would provide the opportunity and the systems and the information to make things like that happen. Yet putting it all together and bringing leaders together and what have you. So another thing that we would be doing in addition is working on an intergenerational co-mentor and leadership training program with volunteers. So we'd be passing on skills to ensure that our efforts continue not only in here in Ojai, but because we're talking about climate as well, you know, potentially could go beyond the scope of the city. We're also looking at collaborating with the city on creating either a sustainability page or link somehow where anyone can go to find out what's happening, not only in the city, but also kind of locally, regionally. So that could be information, you know, where do I find out about such and such, or I want to attend a class or a lecture on sustainability. It would be that opportunity would be there. We'd also potentially be working on grant vetting with the city. So bringing in sources for grant funding, for instance, like Mr. Daddy brought up, you know, funding for the bike racks. Potentially, you know, we could help be bringing that in and working with the city on that whole process. So when things come up, we know where to get funding and, you know, what the criteria is. And then ultimately with all this information we'd be gathering from this first year, and then I mean, I can go into a little more detail, but it was in part of our submittal package, what we'd be doing for the next couple of years. All that would be put together to do a master plan. And I don't need to go probably in too much detail, but basically that end result is how the City Hall campus could function sustainably. So projects could happen. It could be a place for gathering, for education, workshops, and what have you. And then, of course, to function as City Hall, which it does. But that would be the ultimate result. And
If you can wrap up, Kathy.
yeah, I won't go any further. What if I open it up to questions?
That works.
I could go on. And
Nah.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's. Does anybody have any questions for the on the Green Coalition application?
Thank you. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
I just had one. The only thing that I didn't hear
yes.
clearly on it, it's my pet, is the master plan for the City Hall campus regarding the actual coordination of all the landscaping and all of the restoration projects that are taking place. That's going to be part of the master plan
That would be
development. Am I correct?
correct.
That your previous discussion was, it was more likely a 4-year program. But this year would just be initiating it through a public comment period and gathering or soliciting information from the community.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So phase 1, and of course that could be, you know, if the city decided that, hey, we're interested and we want to move forward and they wanted to change the schedule and it was 3 years or 5 years. I mean, of course that could happen too, but we felt like that was, you know, reasonable.
And just to confirm, Kathy, this office would be for a year also.
Yes,
That's what
and
you're
as a matter of
asking.
fact, I have that in the application, but that would include office space, the new building, you know, where Kent Hall is. And I did also include some considerations, but I probably don't need to go into those. You might have those in front of you, but be happy to, a separate meeting or need to give you more information on that.
And that was a unique item I think only the Green Coalition had that in an application requesting some office space. So
Right.
that would also be something, I think it would be worth having the committee recommend whether to consider that or not to the council.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Steve, did you have a question? Sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Yeah, so moving forward, we have the Women's Club. Anybody here from the Women's Club? And then the Hospital Foundation. Okay, thank you.
Last city council meeting I came to, I ended up with COVID a couple of days later, so I didn't want to take that chance.
Yeah.
My name's Phil Carruthers and I here representing the Ojai Valley Community Hospital Foundation, which is the nonprofit organization that supports our local hospital. The hospital is one of the most important pillars, I think, that supports the community. And we're actually fortunate to have a hospital in Ojai because rural hospitals have been closing down across the country. But I'm happy to report that the Ojai Hospital has been able to buck that trend and actually expand its services, including opening a new continuing care facility, I think about 3 years ago, which is a 75-bed facility for rehabilitation and long-term care. But COVID has certainly impacted the foundation's ability to get funds, from our various sources. And the CCC, as we call it, also had to shut down several times during COVID. As you know, it kind of came and went in waves, but they had to shut it down and not allow visitation. So family and friends couldn't come and see the patients that were in the hospital. So we're really asking the city of Ojai to help us to purchase some outside furniture, which would be tables with chairs and umbrellas, so that the residents or patients would have a place to go where it would be safe. Of course, it's much safer outside if you have COVID concerns than inside. So I view this as really a health and safety issue. I didn't hear that in the criteria, but I think it would be a good one to have. So, and the vast majority of the patients in the CCC are from the Ojai area. So any help you can provide would really would benefit our community, would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? I'll note, just because I want to be clear and I want to don't want to mislead anybody. The concern I had with the hospital request, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, where we've never funded, or the council hasn't funded the purchase of items before. It's been, funding somebody to go out and do something or
Be
provide a
happy to be the
service.
first.
And so that's always within the council's prerogative, but that is just, I'll just say that was the concern, I think.
Which we weren't aware of when we filled out the application.
Right. And that's part of why we were saying we need to have like clearer, more distinct explanation of the criteria. So, but and so it'll be council's choice, but just, that's the feedback I have. Councilmember Haney or Mayor Sticks, any?
Well, I would just say
questions?
thank you, obviously, for keeping, a local hospital in Ojai.
Yeah.
And then thank you for the addition to the back. We have friends, my wife and we have friends that are actually living there, and it's just an incredible and impeccable.
I actually spent several days in rehabbing myself from a hip operation. So it's one of those things where, you don't think about it until you need it. When you need it, it's really vital. It's really important to have. So.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you, Phil. Much
Okay.
appreciated. Great service.
Okay, so no questions.
Just last question. Phil, we have a contact person as Chris Rock.
Yeah, she's the executive.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of the other Chris Rock.
I was filling in for her today.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, we have the Chamber of Commerce. I think we have some, yeah, okay. Bob?
Hi.
Hi, Bob.
Excuse me, my name is Bob Kemper and I'm on the chamber board. My recent stint started about a year ago. I previously was on the chamber board for 8 years and we followed the direction of the city council instructions from last year, which were basically when our funding was approved to make certain when we came back this year, we came back asking for less money and had come up with ways to partially fund ourselves. Excuse me, taking that as a mission, that's exactly what we've done. We've cut our request by 40%. We've given a fairly substantial list of services that would be provided in there. And I think as James knows, and has been the experience over the years, that list is a moving target because regularly we'll get a phone call about, hey, I need help with this particular business. Who do you know? What can you do? Kind of thing. So that's always changeable, and we always answer that call. One of the things that I think people don't recognize in government is that many cities have the pleasure of having large businesses in their boundaries. We do not. We have a bunch of small mom and pops, and we don't have car dealerships and big businesses and malls and that kind of stuff. So our base of potential membership support is really small, and those businesses that are here are generally operating on a thread. Jeff can probably speak to that as being a local business owner. So there's not a lot of money for extras. The chamber provides an incredibly valuable service, not just to the city and not just to the businesses, but to the community as a whole, because what we do is try to make certain that we have a vibrant and varied business community and try to focus on supporting and buying local. Now, that's more and more difficult these days, particularly after the pandemic, because you've got the Amazons, et cetera, where they'll ship it, it'll be here tomorrow, no questions asked, et cetera. Keeping our businesses healthy is vital. As you may recall, during COVID, I believe if not for the chamber, many businesses would have gone out of business in Ojai. We were instrumental in providing resources to assist businesses in applying for PPP loans and applying for local, federal, state grants. Hundreds of businesses in the Ojai Valley got grants. I myself got 3 for OPAT. And some of that knowledge, some of those resources are a direct result of what the work the chamber was doing. Secondly, many of our restaurants would not have survived had it not been again for the chamber. We worked very closely with the city, put it on our website, found areas where we could expand the restaurant so they could have more outside dining, pickup, etc. Point I'm making here is that I think people underestimate all of the things that the chamber does. If we don't have a vibrant business community in Ojai, we don't have a town. We need the restaurants. We need the local shops. And I'm not talking about just for tourists. We all know we don't like it, but we need that tourist revenue. But we also need a place for locals to go and locals to dine. And it's the chamber that I think helps supports that effort. Our businesses, hotels, restaurants, shops pay a hell of a lot of tax money to the city of Ojai. And we think that the very least the city can do is help support the Chamber of Commerce, which is their third-party advocate and ally when it comes to working with the city. And I love this city, but it's not always easy to work with. And I think you guys recognize that. I think you need a Chamber of Commerce who's interacting. You can pick up the phone and say, who's the owner of this business? I can answer, not me. We can answer that question. We know that owner. We know that manager. We can reach out. We can solve problems. That type of service is really hard to replace internally. And I know there's been some discussions about, gee, why don't we bring this business development resource in-house? That's one of the reasons. You'll never have that connection with the community that the chamber has. So we've asked for 40% reduction. We're going to provide all the services and more. If we do not get this money, the chamber is gone. I mean, that's not an idle threat. It's a fact. We've increased our dues. We've increased our fundraising. We will not be able to pay our rent. So we will be gone. James, there will be nobody to pick up that phone. So I didn't come prepared to speak in detail about the finances. I think we checked all the boxes in terms of criteria, and certainly will for the next year. Andy's here, our treasurer, and can answer any questions with regard to budget or how we're going to spend the money, and if there's any special reports you'd like, whatever. Bear in mind too, that we're also have been operating under a PSA where regularly we meet with James to go over our list of duties, and those are confirmed. So there's a high level of accountability associated with the services we deliver. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Did I hear you, Jim? Okay.
Just in terms of historically, because this was before my time, and Randy, you were here. What was so in the last 3 years, the city's given the chamber $300,000 total, right?
100,000 a year, yeah.
Yeah, so it's for 3 years, and that agreement was made 3 years ago.
Year to year.
It was a long-term agreement. It was always
Year to year.
It was year to year.
Okay, so 3 years ago, we said, here's $100,000. Was it seen as seed money or?
No, the purpose of it was we had been under contract with the city to run the tourism board.
Mhm.
When it was decided that TOT or T-bid would no longer be used, then that essentially pulled the funding from the chamber. The city needed the chamber, negotiated a contract PSA with the chamber for services in the amount of $100,000. And so that's how we've been operating. It's really not the same as the category you put the museum in, where it's a gift, it's a donation. We really think of this more as a paid for services.
And I think
that-
just to kind of expand a little bit on one of your points, I think the tourism, and it's in your report too, is the TOT extra tax, I think, if I remember right, that was in effect up till 2016, I think.
Yes.
And then I had never really seen what the total amount was, but I know in your report that you provided, you said that used to be about $10,000 a month that the chamber would receive. And so that ended in 2016 when the city chose not to extend that tax. And so then essentially since then, we've had the year-to-year agreements of 100,000. And I think the one thing you asked if it was seed money, the only thing I will say related to that is I think that, like Bob started with, last year, the council said, the amount's going to start coming down, so I think that, like Bob said, they revised their request to reflect that, but I think that was the only connection to like seed money, so.
I also, you heard him say that they've increased dues. So the whole goal behind this was eventually to make them self-sustaining.
Mhm.
So that's on them. And I think we've made it clear as a council that moving forward, that has to be your goal.
It's a goal. The problem is
Well, we're not here to talk about the problem.
right.
We're here to talk about the goal. And you're addressing us saying you understand that goal.
Oh, absolutely.
We hope you achieve it.
Absolutely.
But I think we need to recognize that the funding isn't, it's just not a check that every council is going to be writing from here until eternity.
Yeah.
Oh,
I just want to be clear on that. Okay.
understood.
And how many members do you have?
I think we have 230 at the moment that are paid, and then, yep, but then part of what we're trying to address is that we have looked at, basically, just to step back 1 second, part of what happened was COVID. So when we got out of the T-bid, which that budget that year, just to give you a context, the 2017 tax filing was, the revenue was $600 to $2,000, just to give you the context of the difference.
Mm.
So when that ended,
then we had basically the Thomas Fire. And so the idea was we would have gotten all the businesses on their feet much faster, but COVID really got in the way. So we were much lighter on collecting dues. That's not the case now. So we've identified potentially $26,000 more in dues, even using the old, not the raised rate. So that's part of what we've all identified as members is let's go reach out to all of those businesses, then bring them back in, see what we can do to help them. So that's part of the gap that we will make up.
Mayor, I know you weren't near the council at that time, but that I think personally, I think that T-bid was the biggest mistake that we made not keeping intact. Because all of the issues that are related to tourism, parking, the environmental impacts from air quality, all of those things we discovered in the end during the argument or the discussion for T-bid could all have been funded out of that. Out of those monies. And even that wasn't enough to create a majority on council to continue it. At that time, we were fighting this, I think this illusion that tourism was trampling over the rights of community. And when you're a tourist-based economy, that genie's out of the bottle already. It's how do you manage it? And we had an opportunity with that money that we had never recognized before, that we could have used it to actually solve a multitude of problems instead of us taking our own resources and throwing it at it like we are right now. That's the downside to it. I don't know how to bring the T-bid back, but I'd be in favor of having that discussion
I'm
someday.
considering, I have proposed something that I'm going to present to you at some point. Take it away from the city and bring it onto basically hotel people who stay in hotels to go directly to nonprofits and things like that. So,
Well, that's for further discussion.
yep. Any other questions budget wise?
Jeff or Steve, any questions?
No.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. The Children's Memorial Garden. I don't see Beverly. So, Girls Empowerment Workshop. Anyone? No. And then the Ojai Community Farmers Market. No. Okay. Okay. So I just realized, so the mayor noted, I saw your microphone's not on. So Julia was here, but I think left probably because we're running late. So just for the
Julia
record,
is,
from the farmer's market.
okay.
So
Oh, I'd like to have met her. Where'd she go? She
Are-
live in, does she live in town?
I don't know.
Mayor? No, you don't know her?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we coordinated Earth Day with them this year, but we didn't spend a whole lot of time together. So with that, so I think having that information, having the questions, are having the presentations, we noted kind of as we went, some of the criteria issues and so now I guess the question is applying the criteria and deciding which ones to fund and at what levels. So is there any preference from the committee on kind of how to do that or what?
I mean, I think we can make recommendations, but the council's going to obviously have the final decision on what gets funded or not, the whole council.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, and I should have said that. It's in the report, but I didn't explain that. So today the committee will make recommendations, and then that recommendation will be sent to the council for formal approval. So so what the committee would provide is a recommendation.
And to clarify, the 4 organizations from this list that qualify in terms of the criteria are Ojai Higher Ed with a stipulation, Girls Empowerment, the stipulation, Green Coalition, and the Chamber.
I was trying to remember. I thought higher ed, we needed more information. The other ones, yes.
What were those again, Mayor?
Ojai Higher Ed, we need a little more information. Girls Empowerment, Green Coalition, and the Chamber meet all the criteria according to this list, those
And-
4.
And then, so let me add to that. So yes, and then there's a couple, I think it was Ojai Higher Ed and Farmers Market that we had questions about what other funding sources they had, because our understanding was that they were connected to the school district. And so the question, and the purpose is, it's typical with other agencies, if like higher ed is performing service for Nordoff, that we would also get information about how much the school district's providing. So that was the question on those two that we said we would need more information.
Did you, and you already asked them? for-
We weren't able to connect.
Okay.
We were trying to quickly, but we weren't able.
And they didn't come today.
Well, they
Correct.
were, no, but they're probably teaching.
Yeah.
I would really support those two. I think those are great organizations, you know, the Girls Empowerment and the Ojai Higher Ed,
Mhm.
really teaching math and empowering girls.
And the one thing with the girls empowerment that we had planned to get it more information on as well, and if they were speaking, is there is a requirement in our application that participants not be restricted based on race, religion, gender, or orientation. So we were going to ask them just to confirm, even if they're aiming for girls empowerment, that they would allow boys to participate. I think that would be the key thing we'd have to confirm if we were going to recommend.
Can I just
funding.
add Green Coalition and Farmers Market? I think those add so much to our community, and I'd really like to get those on the list.
Well, I'd start with who was here.
Mhm.
Because again, I'm sorry, if someone's not here to sell themselves or sell their need, that tells me something right off the bat, whether they're teaching or not. Everyone's got an opportunity to send someone as a liaison. So I'd be more inclined to the people that are here, just give them right now an up and down yes to move forward. And then come back to the ones, Mayor, that you just talked about, and then discuss how to, if we need additional information from them, yes. But again, today we're supposed to be sending a recommendation back to council. So as I start this, I see the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council is $30,000. They're here. They've made a good pitch, and I have no problem supporting that. The next one was the Green Coalition, which is what you just talked about. I come back down to the Ojai Valley Chamber at 66. And then for me, my questions were going to be on the Girls Empowerment Workshop, because I do agree with you, that is important. And then the other one is the Earth Day event for me is how to do that. We've helped the farmers market in the past. I don't think there's a reason not to. So I can see a yes on that and a yes on that. And then as I look at the Ojai Valley Community Foundation, they're asking for 30,000. As I'm doing the math here, I think that if we gave the Ojai Valley Community Foundation 25, we could, or I'm sorry, 13,000, then we could pick up the Girls Empowerment Workshop and the Ojai Community Farmers Market as an additional 12,000, and that puts us at our $151,000 total. So that's how I look at it, unless there's another entity up here that you wanted to talk about. I'm not,
And which one is the Ojai Community Foundation?
I think it was the hospital.
the
foundation.
hospital.
Okay.
And so you said funding that one, because I did the math too. We'd have 13,000 left. So
Right.
funding that one.
So we did that at
13.
13 versus 30,
Hmm.
because they were here.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, the choices now are, and we don't necessarily have to spend this money,
Mhm.
but if we feel that they're worthy causes, providing workshops to teens to educate with skills for adulthood, I have no problem with that, and I have no problem supporting Earth Day.
James,
Yes.
so the first thing we did today is approve the criteria.
Correct.
So I think, the first ones that I would pick are the ones that no criteria conflict identified, because they have already met the criteria that we set forth, while others obviously have questions that need to be answered before they would meet all of the criteria that we approved, even though the council hasn't.
Mhm.
And and take it from there. And I don't know, I didn't add up I think I did, but I don't remember what it was. The total for just the ones that were, had no conflict.
Yeah, and I'm doing that now. Okay, so,
I think
okay.
I did the math, Steve. It's 111. It's the Chamber, Green Coalition, Girls
But-
Empowerment, and Ojai Higher Ed's 1,011. I mean,
Okay.
111, sorry.
Okay, so that would leave, if we started with that, that's 111,000 and that leaves 40,000 available if, you know, and that can either be allocated or not at this time. So
Or we could use it for paving.
I don't think you can use the community development money, I don't think.
Well, it can go back to the general fund, correct?
Right.
yeah, it could go to general fund.
Okay, I'm not opposed to that. Jeff, what's your thoughts?
Ojai is on here, which I'm a huge supporter of. They're providing homeless prevention. That sounds like a community service, having come across a few homeless encampments in town and having a business downtown. That is an issue that is pretty important. And there was nobody referenced that. If Help of Ojai doesn't get this money, I'm not familiar with their budget, but what's that gonna do to their budget? Anybody have a clue?
Yeah, if you read the we reviewed the application and then they came and spoke at the council meeting, and so that they kind of explained it. Our understanding from those two things is it's a program they already have and they're asking for more money to expand the program. So my understanding was if they don't get the funding, they just won't expand the program. I'm probably not talking on the microphone, but they won't expand the program. And so it didn't, they didn't indicate when they spoke that this would make or break any of their available programs. It was just going to expand them. So.
Well, I would be in favor of putting some towards that because the problem has expanded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Alan. I do agree though with Steve that we should definitely use these criteria because we need a system and we're developing a system. And so that would be my recommendation.
Sorry, Jeff, they probably will call you Alan.
Happened a lot.
Okay, so let's go over that again. So, what's your 111 and what are the entities?
I think the 111 was Chamber 66, and that's assuming that we're fully funding, which is also something we could talk
Okay.
about. But Chamber at 66, Green Coalition at 30, Girls Empowerment 5,000, Higher Ed 10,000.
And I would like to add the farmers market because I think that's a really important, and we did fund it this year. And in terms of the chamber, I'd definitely like to discuss in future how it will be self-sustaining, because from what I've understood, that was sort of the concept. And I understand COVID, and I mean, we've had a crazy few years in the fire.
The Fire Coalition in that 111?
The Green Coalition, Green Coalition was the Fire Safe Council's not in that list. And the reason being, it was, Chris spoke to it, is the criteria that we had identified as the current funding that was in last year, and then haven't received the final report on that yet. So that would be up to the committee. Chris noted it was a extenuating circumstance. It'd be up to the committee to determine if they were going to accept that and provide some funding or not.
Right, I think he did, as you referenced, he didn't report anything because there wasn't any activity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they didn't
So-
report.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing too is it's as we talked, this is why this is so difficult. So Jeff just brings up homelessness, and we know that fire hardening is huge.
Yeah.
So how do you not fund fire hardening and how do you not fund homelessness? So, the question is, to what extent do we want to do that? So,
Can I make a suggestion that we talk to council about the criteria and the ones that do not meet the criteria so that we can find consensus in that way?
well, it's easy. Well, first of all, the ones that don't meet the criteria you've put back in. So the Ojai the Ohio Ed did not meet the criteria, but it's added in. Am I correct?
Oh, higher ed, we had said we needed more information to
So
determine
it's
if they
not
met the
in,
criteria.
correct? So I'm reading 30,000 for the Green Coalition, 66 for the Chamber, 5 and 69.50. Am I correct? That's our number. That's 111.
You lost me on that part.
So we said we're going to approve right off the bat. Steve's idea was
The ones that
approve
meet
the
the
ones that-
criteria. Okay.
that met the criteria.
They,
Correct?
they clearly met them that we
Right.
already said. So that'd be Green Coalition, Chamber, and Farmers Market. And I thought there was one more, but I think Girls Empowerment and Ohio Ed, we both said we needed more information.
Right.
They may be, but we just weren't sure yet.
So
So
you've
that
got
would be
96, 101, and 69. So you're at about $107,000. We could take that back to council. At the same time, we could notify the groups that we feel should come back and speak at that session. That's what I'm hearing.
to provide, and we
And
could
then
get
let
more
the full
information.
council make that decision as to how to allocate those funds. That's what I'm hearing.
Randy, I agree with you. I think that's the way to go, since the council is going to make the decision in the end anyway, and there might be other council members that, you know, have strong feelings toward different organizations, and they're going to, you know, at least have a chance to give their point of view on that also, rather than us as a committee.
Right.
So I think that's a good idea to approve those that we just said, and then let council decide which ones they think are worthy of the extra money.
What also I like about it is the fact that we're actually using the criteria
Mhm.
to move this forward. And again, it gives applicants that haven't received funding one more opportunity to present their case.
And I think it speaks to the way things are supposed to work, right? Is like staff gives criteria and then council determines if big picture policy, is worth kind of, adjusting the criteria or like identifying that there is an extenuating circumstance or not. So I think from kind of a process standpoint, the committee is saying this is the criteria. Based on this criteria, there's three, and then it's up to council if and how they want to fund the remaining $48,000. I think it ends up being.
Thank you for systematizing it, James. Much
Trying to get
appreciated.
a system. Yeah.
Well, and then my last thought is, that we were also given the responsibility to make some of these hard choices.
Mhm.
And so right now I'm looking at, there's roughly $44,000 left out of the 151 that we've earmarked. And so the question is, do we want to do that, or do we want to just move this to council as is? And I'd be willing to take a vote on that. I'm not saying do it or don't do it. If as a body, that might be the way to go, is just move it back to council versus us trying to
I
fight
agree.
over $40,000.
Yeah.
It also gives the applicants one more opportunity to come and present their case.
Yeah, I agree. And Steve agrees, I think,
Okay.
too. Yeah.
I do.
Okay, so I will recap so that everybody here, and then I think so that we're all on the same page. So the recommendation to council will be to fund the three that we did not identify any criteria issues with, which is the Green Coalition, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Farmers Market, for a total of about 103,000. And then it will be left to council whether and how to fund the remaining 48,000.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll close that out, and I think that's a unanimous recommendation, so we'll move forward with that. That is the only item on the agenda. So with that, we will try to do this very quickly, just because I know people are waiting, and apologies for process and everything, but we'll try to bring it to council at the August 24th meeting. So we will have final answers at that time. I think it's 24th, might be the 23rd. I might be off.
23rd.
Okay, 23rd. Okay. Sure. Mhm. So if the council authorizes, like for the chamber's case, if the council says $66,000, then I would just plan to do monthly and we would catch up for the monthly. So, yeah. All right. Thank you. All right. Thanks, everybody. And
Thank you
we'll
for,
adjourn at
thanks
that.
for coming.
We'll see some of you one more time.
Package again, let me know how we do it. Okay.